After saving Raffleson's nephew's life while serving in Afghanistan, John Cale, a member of the United States Capitol Police, was assigned to work for Speaker of the House Eli Raffleson, with his daughter Emily, who is extremely passionate about politics. Cale is working hard to improve their connection. He wants to impress her by getting a position with the Secret Service, but the interviewer, Carol Finnerty, is a former classmate who thinks he is unsuitable since he doesn't respect authority. She and Cale take part in a tour of the White House after lying to Emily about the interview's conclusion. James Sawyer, the President of the United States, also suggests a contentious peace agreement amongst allies to withdraw armed forces from the Middle East. In the meantime, a bomb planted in the heart of the U.S. Capitol by a guy posing as a janitor explodes, bringing down the dome. Vice President Alvin Hammond is carried onto Air Force One while Raffleson, who was in the Capitol, and Finnerty are transferred to a secure command center underneath the Pentagon. Cale is separated from Emily, who had left the tour group to use the toilet, while the White House is placed under lockdown, while the tour group is being held prisoner by mercenaries under the leadership of Emil Stenz. Cale manages to steal a gun from one of the assailants, Carl Killick, and flees to locate his daughter. President Sawyer and his detail are being escorted to the Presidential Emergency Operations Center by retiring head of the Presidential Detail Martin Walker. Walker reveals himself as the commander of the attack when Sawyer wins entry by killing everyone else in Sawyer's team. Walker is seeking retribution for the death of his son during a failed black operations mission. After failing to locate Emily, Cale kills a mercenary and steals his radio and rifle. Cale locates and saves the president via the radio. Skip Tyler is hired by Walker and Stenz to get into the defensive system, but they still need Sawyer to turn on the nuclear football. Before being discovered by Killick, Emily sneaks up on the mercenaries and makes a video of them. Uploading it on YouTube, Walker wants the Federal Reserve to pay $400 million as a ransom for the hostages. The Pentagon is reached by Cale and Sawyer, and Finnerty instructs Cale to take Sawyer through a network of covert subterranean tunnels. Finnerty then uses Emily's footage to identify the mercenaries. Learning that they had previously worked for a number of government institutions and extremist political organizations, they are informed that Stenz, a former member of the Special Forces, was disavowed and set afire while on a mission, which resulted in the Taliban capturing him. Walker had terminal disease, which suggests that his involvement was a suicide mission and that the incident was not a ransom strike. The tunnel gate is explosively sabotaged, forcing Cale and Sawyer to flee in a presidential limousine. Cale becomes distracted by the sight of Killick holding Emily at gunpoint, which leads to a vehicle chase/shootout with Stenz on the White House grounds, which results in Sawyer and Cale being thrown into the White House pool. Sawyer and Cale are believed to have died in an explosion that follows a shooting. Hammond is then sworn in as president from Air Force One. When Cale and Sawyer admit they are still alive, they find out Hammond has given the go-ahead for Delta Force to launch an airborne invasion to retake the White House. Despite his best efforts, Cale is unable to prevent the mercenaries from shooting down the helicopters despite knowing they carry Javelin surface-to-air missiles. Cale and Stenz get into a fight, and as he flees, he drops his White House passes for himself and Emily, since Stenz already knew about Emily from the video. He introduces her to Walker in the Oval Office after discovering that she is Cale's daughter. Tyler completes the upload to NORAD in the meanwhile and fires a missile at Air Force One, taking out Hammond and all of the other passengers. After taking office, Raffleson orders an airstrike on the White House in an effort to put an end to the issue. Cale is informed by Finnerty of Raffleson's choice. Over the White House intercom, Walker warns Cale that if Sawyer is not turned over, he will shoot Emily. In the end, Sawyer gives himself up to save Emily because he knows Cale could still save them both if he were free. Walker tells Sawyer that his goal in carrying out the attack was to demonstrate the strength of the United States. Cale lights the Lincoln bedroom on fire to set off the alarms and sprinklers as Walker once more threatens to shoot Emily. Tyler tries to flee among the commotion but runs into the explosives at the tunnel gate. He attempts to turn it off, but as he does, it explodes, killing him. When Donnie Smith, the White House tour guide, ambushes Killick when he is trying to kill Cale, Killick is fatally struck by a clock. Cale fights Stenz and eventually kills him with a grenade belt after liberating the prisoners and giving Donnie the responsibility of getting them out safely. Sawyer tackles a distracted Walker after being caught off guard by the explosion. But Walker takes the upper hand and compels Sawyer to activate the football before shooting him dead. Allegedly, Walker targets many locations in Iran using new launch codes obtained from an unnamed source. But Cale shoots Walker with the minigun from the presidential SUV before Walker can fire the missile. Emily takes a presidential flag and waves it on the front yard when Cale alerts her to the impending airstrike, which causes the pilots to cancel their attack. Sawyer confesses that he is still alive because the bullet that struck him struck a pocket watch that his wife had given to him. When Finnerty phones them, he informs them that Walker did not hire the mercenaries and that someone else is responsible for the attack. When Cale recognizes who it is, he seeks Sawyer for assistance in outing the offender. Later, Raffleson and Finnerty make their way to the White House. Raffleson then gives the order to send soldiers back into the Middle East, breaking Sawyer's peace agreement. When Cale informs them that Sawyer has been dead, Walker's pager, which was the source of the revised launch codes, Cale establishes that Raffleson and Walker had planned the attack in order to get revenge for Raffleson's resistance to Sawyer's deal. Upon his arrival, Sawyer arrests Raffleson. On his way to the hospital, Sawyer gives Cale and Emily an aerial tour of Washington, D.C. before formally offering Cale a position in the Secret Service.